I'm going to be using a scale for my reviews now. Basically, for every game I review, I will give a number out of 7. 7 is the best possible score, and 1 is the absolute worst. 1s are reserved for all-time lows, like Spyro Enter the Dragonflyers, Sonic 06. 7 is for the all-time best. Really, really, really good games. Games will need to work hard as hell and need to be nearly flawless if they want to get a 7. Also, fun little fact, only one game in this series will be receiving a 1, and only one game in this series will be receiving a 7. Each number has a title as well. 1 is terrible, 2 is bad, 3 is mediocre, 4 is average, 5 is good, 6 is great, and 7 is excellent. Now I realize that Crash 1 and 2 don't have ranks, so I will assign them now. Crash 1 I give a 4 out of 7. And Crash 2 I give a 6 out of 7. Anyways, on with the review. Now, with the success of Crash 2, one has to ask this question. Has Naughty Dog played their trump card too early? Because think about it. Crash 2 was really good. Almost a little too good. So good that it would be nearly impossible to top it. Of course, remember that I said nearly. Also, let's replay this part from my Crash 2 review. And is a huge improvement, and is what I consider to be my second favorite game in the franchise. That's right, I said second, meaning that there is one game that is superior, that is the ultimate best Crash game, and it is not this one. Wait, hold on a second. Yes, it's the review that I both desperately wanted to and didn't want to make. I wanted to make this review to get my points across and also offer a new perspective that really isn't expressed that whole lot on this game. But I also didn't want to because I'm probably going to receive a lot of hate for my opinions of this game, and I'm also probably going to upset two people who I am both fans of. Those people being Digital Masterpieces and Gadgetron Watcher. Now, let me get this out of the way first. I do not hate Crash 3. Don't worry, this isn't the game that's getting a 1. I don't think this game is bad at all. Unfortunately, this game just lies in the undesirable position of being compared to its older brother, Crash 2. I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons to Crash 2, by the way, so you should go watch that review first if you haven't already. Now, generally speaking, there are two teams when it comes to Crash. Similar to the likes of Team Edward and Team Jacob, you're either a Crash 2 person or a Crash 3 person. As you can imagine, I'm a Crash 2 person. But don't worry, I've got legitimate claims to back my statement up. No, this isn't going to be a gaming in the Clinton years type video where I just go, this game is bad. Here's all the reasons why it is good. I have to be what I believe legitimate concerns as to why this game is inferior to its older brother, Crash 2. But like always, we need to cover our story first. Crash 3 picks up immediately after Crash 2's true ending. By the way, the true ending is what you get for completing the game 100%. After Cortex's space station is destroyed by Crash and friends, the ruins of the device land on the grave of an almighty entity, or mask, called Uka Uka, who is voiced by Clancy Brown. Uka Uka's sinister as hell laugh gets the attention of Crash's mask, Aku Aku, who is voiced by Mel Winkler, who also apparently speaks now. This is particularly odd, as he out of nowhere just starts speaking. Sure, he said in the old games, but he didn't have tons of dialogue. Well, I'm not gonna complain. At least I can take Aku Aku seriously, unlike oh god. But I digress. Aku Aku has Crash and Coco run inside as he tells them the story of Uka Uka's origin. We then learn more about Uka Uka's backstory. As it turns out, Uka Uka has actually been giving Cortex orders to dispose of Crash the whole time and was just encased in stone. Uka Uka is now free and is sick of Cortex being a shitty final boss. So Uka Uka now decides that he will take over instead and has hired a new person to help him named N Trippy. Meanwhile, Aku Aku explains the same story to Crash and Coco from his perspective. As it turns out, Aku Aku was the one who locked Uka Uka in stone and did it to prevent this from happening. Oh, hey! Aku Aku then brings Crash and Coco to the Time Twister, which is basically the new warp room, to collect the crystals. So the game is essentially what you would expect. You go from start to finish and collect the crystals, yada yada yada, we've been through this stuff before. However, that's not all there is to this game. Vehicles make a return like last time. There are plenty more vehicles to ride around on. In fact, a little too many. Okay, no, not a little. A lot too many. This game goes way too far with the vehicle levels. They become less entertaining and more annoying. Let's compare it to Crash 2 for a second. Crash 2 had 27 levels total. You used vehicles in 9 levels. That means you're using vehicles 33% of the time. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Well, let's compare Crash 2 to its brother, Warped. In Warped, there are 30 levels total. You use vehicles in 17 levels. That means you're in vehicles 57% of the time. That's more than half the game. And it's nearly double the amount of vehicles in Crash 2. But wait a minute. Instead, let's exclude levels where you don't control vehicles the entire time, like Hang 8. In Crash 2's case, you use vehicles the entirety of 5 levels, which adds up to 19% of the game. In Warped's case, there's only one level where you're given a vehicle that you don't use for the entirety of the level, and that's Dynamite, meaning you're using vehicles for the entirety of 16 levels, which adds up to 53%. That's more than triple the amount of Crash 2. Newsflash, that's way too many. Okay, let's calm down a second and think. Maybe the vehicles control so well that they make a good trade-off. Yeah, this kinda sucks. Only a handful of the vehicles control well. Most feel incredibly wonky and off, particularly the motorcycle and plane, and the underwater thing. And you know what? Pretty much all the vehicles, with the exception of the dinosaur and tiger, control like ass. But the worst by far is the jet ski. Never before have I seen such terrible vehicle controls in an otherwise decent game. This thing controlled like shit. The camera was unreliable, the levels were designed atrociously, and these are the only levels that kept me from 100%ing this game. That's right, I couldn't 100% this game. Not because I'm really bad at it, but because the vehicles were so horrendous. I tried getting the gem on Tell No Tales, but honestly I just could not be bothered. Plus, there are 4 levels of these type. 4! I can barely stand one of these things, let alone 4. Thankfully, the crappy clone of this game didn't contain jet skis, and I'm getting ahead of myself. See, the vehicles worked so well in Crash 2 because Crash 2 didn't overdo them. The vehicles served as a nice surprise. The majority of the game was spent platforming, and you got tired of that after a while. So whenever a vehicle showed up, you got excited. Now you end up controlling vehicles a majority of the time. The vehicles never got old in Crash 2 because they were rare, but in this case, they take up more than half the game. As you can imagine, they get really old. Really fast. One thing that I do enjoy, however, are oh my gosh, I can't do this. One thing that I do enjoy, however, are the variety between levels. Crash 3 takes a different approach, but I still enjoy it. Now, in addition to going to different places, we also go to different times. We go to medieval times, Egyptian times, the future, and much more. Instead of taking a natural feel, this game takes a more dense and populated feel. In terms of visuals, this game is a digital masterpiece. No pun intended. It pushed the limits of the PS1 in what was many considered to be the best looking PlayStation game of its time. That is until Spyro 2 rolled out a year later and stole that title. But it was pretty damn awesome when it came. Also, the soundtrack is excellent as always. The game, instead of taking a more environmentally diverse soundtrack, goes for a more culturally diverse soundtrack. Of course, the soundtrack can lack at times. I can't remember how the plane levels went off the top of my head, and all the bonus rounds sound exactly the same. But it's got some great level themes and some excellent boss themes, my favorite of which is Dingodiles. Speaking of the bosses, they make a return in this game, and if there's one thing this game did right, it's the bosses. The bosses felt really challenging this time around, especially Dingodile. Hell, even Tiny gave me some trouble, and he's only the first boss. Also, they finally mastered the final boss. Crash 1's final boss was pathetic, and as for Crash 2, this game had a final boss? Huh. Yes, this game's final boss feels challenging. It feels big, it feels epic, and it feels tense. It's what a final boss should be. Again, it's no Spyro 2, but it's pretty damn awesome. Also, upon completing each boss, you gain a new power. These powers include a stronger body slam, the ability to jump higher, a longer spin, a bazooka of all things, and the ability to run faster. In addition to the new powers, we get new crates. One is called a slot crate, and honestly, I could have done without it. This crate will constantly switch between different crate types, like question mark crates, one-up crates, and even Aku Aku crates. However, these can be annoying, because after a certain amount of time, they'll do this. Like that. That's what it sounded like, right?
Oh, no, get the box, get the box!
Fuck. Shit. Oh well. Well, we tried. What
do you mean we? I would have got that.
Like its predecessors, Warped doesn't end immediately after you defeat the final boss. Gems make a comeback again, and they act exactly as you would expect them to. However, every single level has a gem, including the vehicle levels. Some are incredibly annoying, like the flight levels. The goal of these levels are to shoot down planes. However, there are also boxes lying around, meaning you have to get the boxes and destroy the planes in one life. Or so I thought. As it turns out, there's a glitch in this game called death warping. It allows you to keep any items after dying, meaning you can destroy the boxes, get the gem, and then kill yourself. When you go to destroy the planes, you won't have to worry about the boxes. As it turns out, you can do this with regular levels too, even ones with death roots. I tried to avoid using this glitch, but in the case of these damn flying levels, I just had to. However, gems aren't the only collectible this time around. This game also introduces relics. Oh boy, relics. Man, do I have quite a lot to say about the relics. To receive a relic, you need to complete the level within a certain amount of time. When you begin a time trial, some boxes will instead turn into time crates. When these crates are broken, they will freeze the clock for 1, 2, or 3 seconds. After you finish, you will be awarded a relic depending on your time. If your time was acceptable, you'll be awarded a sapphire relic. If your time is good, you'll get a gold relic. And if your time is really good, you'll get a platinum. On paper, it sounds like a good idea. But remember, every level, including the vehicle levels, have relics. This includes the crappy underwater levels and the flight levels. But not only do the relics suck for the vehicle levels, but they suck for the regular levels as well. Let's go back and listen to something I said in my Crash 1 review. As for the rest of the game, it's pretty well designed. The levels were designed with patience in mind. If you take your time and be careful with your movement, you'll find little to no trouble with this game. Thankfully, they weren't stupid enough to make time a major factor of this game. Oh. Yes. Crash 1's levels were designed with one aspect in mind. Patience. Both Crash 1 and 2 are, in terms of their difficulty, average. If you take your time with them. The instant time becomes a factor, it becomes much more challenging. Many levels in Crash 2 had moving platforms, or enemies that can only be attacked after a certain amount of time, like the henchman with the blowtorches in the sewers. Now, one would expect that the design of Crash 3's levels would change to compensate. Spoiler alert, they don't. The levels are still designed with the idea of patience in mind, but now you've got a clock over your head. Some levels work really well with time trials, like the Tiger levels, and others, not so much. Let's compare Crash 2 and 3 for a second. 2 of the levels in Crash 2 put a clock over your head. However, notice the way these levels are designed. There are platforms you need to wait for, but only in the beginning. When the timer starts, the rest of the level does not contain any moving platforms. It contains mines that move back and forth, but they can be worked around, and don't have to be waited for. Also, notice how there are 3 levels of this type: Hang-8, Air Crash, and Plant Food. Notice how the only one to contain moving platforms in the middle of the level is also the only one that doesn't put a clock over your head. Air Crash. Now let's compare this to High Time, which is a platforming nightmare. This level is filled with moving platforms, enemies that require to be waited for, obstacles that can't be worked around without glitches, and many more. Any sensible person would see that you need to take your sweet time with it, and why wouldn't you? You've got all the time in the world after all. Or at least you used to, because now you have a clock over your head. The relics become excessively difficult and, most importantly, tedious. It's such a shame, because after all that Crash 2 went through to make sure that it was challenging and not tedious, Crash 3 feels like it took a step backwards. Keep in mind that in order to get 100%, the relics are a requirement, because after completing the final boss, a new warp room opens up, which gives you access to... oh great. More vehicle levels! To be fair, I did like one of the vehicle levels, Rings of Power. Why? Because in this case, Crash feels like he's going fast. In the other levels, he doesn't feel fast. He has to wait for water to rise and sink and for platforms to move up and down. Something else I want to address. This game's platinums are fucking brutal! Why the hell do they need to be so damn hard? How in the hell do you expect people to do them? Especially on these fucking plane levels. I just barely made the Sapphire and Mad Bombers. How the hell do you expect me to get a gold, let alone a platinum in...
Dad? I think I just shit my pants.
Also, Crash 3 lacks in secrets. It has 2 secrets, both of which I have no idea how you would think to find. What made Crash 2's secrets so great are how they were hinted at subtly. I'm gonna spoil some secrets from Crash 2 and 3 if you don't mind. Crash 2's secrets weren't impossible. Example, after you receive the box gem on Turtle Woods in Crash 2, if you go back and play it, you'll notice that the box counter says boxes out of 0 instead of the normal 65. Go through the level by getting 0 boxes, and a pleasant surprise will await you at the end. Now let's bring Crash 3 into the equation. This game only has 2 secrets, both of which seem to come out of nowhere. Seriously? How the hell was I supposed to know how to get grabbed by this pterodactyl during the gem route? Crash 3 is by no means a bad game, not in the slightest, but it's in the unfortunate position of being compared to its predecessor, Crash 2, which by comparison is the superior of the two. While Crash 3 may be inferior to Crash 2, that's not to say it still isn't tons of fun to play. Sure, the vehicles are annoying. Sure, the soundtrack may lack at times. Sure, the relics are a pain in the ass. But it's got some excellent graphics, great platforming, and some damn awesome bosses to boot. It's a game that you should definitely try if you're a fan of platformers. And hey, While I might not agree, a lot of people prefer this game to Crash 2. Play it yourself and you might just make up your mind. I give Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped a 5 out of 7. Now, this game serves as the finale to the Crash trilogy. Now that Crash's story is pretty much tied up, this begs the question, what's next for Crash Bandicoot? Join me next time for when I review Crash Team Racing.
What?
You jumped like into the club. It's easy to get. You just
Easy to get.
Yeah, you know, it's just easy to
Well, well,